As always happens every time a president leaves office, you get a slew of books that come out 6 months, a year later. And that is starting to happen with regard to Joe Biden's term as president. The first one of those books, I think, is being released next Tuesday or something. It's a book by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. It's called Original Sin. And the focus of the book is the 2024 campaign and leading up to the 2024 campaign. And I've read a couple of reviews of the book that by people who've had access to a bunch of these other books, and they're saying this is the best one for the subject matter that it covers. Its subtitle is President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. Now, following the debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, I've been pretty outspoken on this subject area. I think that what Joe Biden did, staying in the race as long as he did, was shameful. I don't think it's the only reason that Donald Trump was reelected, but it's pretty goddamn near the top. And this book backs that up. And, you know, the story in this book is about the danger of willful ignorance. And I'm reading, I read a review of it on New York Times in their book review section, an article written by Jennifer. Her last name is spelled Szalai. It's a really good article if you want to go read it. But, you know, it basically starts out by saying the original sin of election 2024 was Biden's decision to run for re-election, followed by aggressive efforts to hide his cognitive diminishment. Up to, you know, I mean, he announced that he was going to run for re-election shortly after the midterms, towards the end of 2022, because Democrats did better than expected in those midterms. And so Joe Biden thought he was good for a second term. And let me skip ahead a minute here. So this book basically is a step-by-step account of how the people closest to a stubborn, aging president enabled his quixotic resolve to run for a second term. The authors trace the deluge of trouble that flowed from Biden's original sin, the sidelining of Vice President Kamala Harris, the attacks on journalists who deigned to report on worries about Biden's apparent fatigue and mental state, an American public lacking clear communication from the president and left to twist in the wind. It was an abomination, one source told the authors. He stole an election from the Democratic Party. He stole it from the American people. Interesting. The blistering charge is attributed to a prominent Democratic strategist who also publicly defended Biden. In Original Sin, the reasons given for saying nice things in public about the president are legion. Some Democrats, especially those who didn't see the president that often, relied on his surrogates for reassurances about his condition. He's fine, he's fine, he's fine. Others were wary of giving ammunition to the Trump campaign, warning that he was an existential threat to the country. For those who tried to justify the behavior described here because of the threat of a second Trump term, those fears should have shocked them into reality, not away from it. And the book goes into a tremendous amount of detail about how senior aides, his family, and his closest advisors essentially walled him off. They didn't show him polling information that showed that he was polling in the low 40s or upper 30s. To this day, he was on The View last week and said that if he would have stayed in the race, he would have won. That is delusional, 100%. Joe Biden was a great vice president. to Barack Obama for 8 years. The first 2 years of Joe Biden's presidency were incredibly consequential in the best way possible. By early 2023, he was so fucking out of it that his staff was shortening everything, shortening meetings, shortening speeches, shortening remarks, shortening his day. There are accounts of debate prep in here that are shocking. They are shocking. He would wander off and sit down on a chair by the pool and just fall asleep in the middle of debate prep before that debate with Donald Trump. And it, looking back, knowing now the number of people who were covering for him and who were intentionally hiding this information from the American public, it just makes me feel rage. If he had just dropped out after the midterms, the Democrats could have had a 2-year-long primary process. They could have picked a candidate, the way you're supposed to. And we wouldn't have had a candidate who was anointed with 100 days left before Election Day. I mean, he screwed Kamala Harris over so bad. He put her in an absolutely impossible position. Her loss is his fault. And, I take a couple issues with certain things that she did in her campaign, but given what she was handed, I think she did better than literally any other person could have. And the fact that I lay her loss at Joe Biden's feet, 100%. 100%. Because he handed this thing off to her with so little time that she didn't have a chance. She didn't have a chance. And he had spent the previous 3.5 years sidelining her within his administration and keeping her out of the spotlight, I think also on purpose. And so it's not like people had the previous 3.5 years to actually get to know her in any substantive manner. And it's just fucking atrocious, man. It's just atrocious. People who didn't see Biden on a daily basis were increasingly taken aback when they finally laid eyes on him. They would remark on how his once booming voice had become a whisper, how his confident stride had become a slow-moving shuffle. One aghast congressman recalls being reminded of his father, who had Alzheimer's. Another thought of his father, too, who died of Parkinson's. The people closest to Biden landed on some techniques to handle or disguise what was happening. Restricting urgent business to the hours between 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., because that's how the globe works. Instructing his writers to keep his speeches brief so that he didn't have to spend too much time on his feet. Having him use the shorter stairs to Air Force One. When making videos, his aides sometimes filmed in slow motion to blur the reality of how slowly he actually walked. By late 2023, his staff was pushing as much of his schedule as they could to midday. They knew it. They knew. His inner circle and closest advisors knew what condition he was in a 1.5 years before Election Day. And they lied to the American people, and they hid that from the American people on purpose. And I wish they could be prosecuted for it.